So without further ado, I'd like to invite the president of the Konrad-Adenauer Foundation, Professor Lammert, for his opening speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dix. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, honorable members of parliament, distinguished guests, dear friends and partners and colleagues of the Adenauer Foundation. It is my privilege to open this fourth European African Parliamentary Conference here in Windhoek, and I welcome you all and thank you for coming. My particular thanks go to those few of you who already participated in the first conference 4 years ago, but I am grateful for all participants from Europe and from Africa, some of whom had to make remarkable travels with remarkable detours, so thank you very much for coming. When we initiated this new format a couple of years ago, our principal idea and concern was, and still is, how do we deal politically with new global challenges? We all have our duties and responsibilities at home. But we all feel more and more affected in fulfilling these duties by developments which take place abroad. Regional achievements and problems have become a global significance, and global trends have always regional origins and mostly regional addresses. Looking to the proportions which we have in and of a global world with, in the meantime, more than 8 billion people, we have to be aware of the realities. And one of these realities is that in terms of size and number of people, Europe is a rather small continent. In terms of economic strength and political influence, it is rather the other way around, or perhaps I should say at least it has been for a long time the other way round. Obviously, we are living in a global world in which single nation states no longer have a realistic chance to influence or even determine the rules and the framework conditions of the global system. This is definitely true for European states, and I guess it is also true for African states. So my understanding is that the increasing loss of nations' sovereignty, individual nations' sovereignty, makes it all the more necessary for states to work together if they want to maintain their ability to shape and influence political developments. This also applies for Africa and Europe in a principally very similar way. This, once again, was and still is the background of our invitation. We are convinced that in a global world we definitely need new approaches. We definitely need new types of cooperation. We need cooperation between countries, we need cooperation between continents, we need cooperation between parliaments, we need cooperation between parties. By the way, it's not just by accident that all invited parliamentarians belong to political parties, which at the same time are partners of the Adenauer Foundation in our respective countries. And this is even more true in a time in which we observe a remarkable, if not dramatic, decline of democratic standards. It is not convenient but unavoidable to remind us that, let's say, 2 or 3 decades ago, we were nearly convinced that we live in a time of ultimate democratic developments. And it is precisely this period of time, the last 2-3 decades, in which the number of serious democracies globally has not steadily been increased, but declined. Which again is not only true for other continents, but for the European Union as well. So again, we are confronted with a remarkable challenge, and although we never have identical situations in individual countries, we have similar situations which we have to address. And our understanding is that we can and should play insofar a particular role, particularly encouraging parliaments and parliamentarians to be aware of the changed situation in which we live and being prepared to participate in new approaches and in new types of cooperation. Mr. Dix has already mentioned that our first conference with this background and with this idea took place 4 years ago in Abidjan. The second, Corona-affected and limited, was a virtual conference. The third one took place in Berlin, and now we are back in Africa. And again, not by accident, in Namibia and in Windhoek. I don't have to explain that there are particular connections and relations between Europe and Africa. We share a common and not uncomplicated history, which again is true for the particular relationship between Germany and Namibia. And this approach of bringing parliamentarians from Africa and Europe together already started in the late 90s under completely other circumstances as far as the expectations of political developments were concerned. And it started in Windhoek. At that time, 1996, again, the Adenauer Foundation organized a first meeting of parliamentarians from Europe and from Africa. And it is indeed worthwhile to remind the remarkable Windhoek Declaration, which has been developed at this conference more than 25 years ago. In this Windhoek Declaration, the participants, parliamentarians from Europe and Africa, agreed on the following principles: respect for human dignity, human rights and freedom, separation of powers and the rule of law, multi-party democracy and good governance with regular, free and fair elections, political systems that upholds the principles of subsidiarity, local and regional autonomy, solidarity and responsibility, a market economy with a social and ecological orientation. This is, I think, a remarkable program, which probably at the time when it has been developed would have been regarded as more or less self-evident, and in the meantime, again, has become a challenge. To which extent are we still able and prepared to implement these principles? And to which extent are we able, if we are still interested in implementing them, to do it alone, with a single approach? The question is answered as soon as it is done. So once again, I think it does make sense to try and look for new approaches. And let me, finishing my opening remarks, refer to a new publication of the Adenauer Foundation, which has been published just a few weeks ago, a paper on relations between Europe and Africa, in which you can find the following orientations. The perception of the African continent in Germany and Europe has long been in need for a fundamental rethink. We must be much more responsive to the interests of our African partners and refrain from paternalism. A clear definition of interests on both sides makes it possible to identify overlaps, map out win-win scenarios, and prioritize when it comes to selecting partners and fields of activity. We have to recognize the new geopolitical situation, and we should seriously examine where and to which extent we can do it jointly. This conference hopefully contributes to such a new approach, and therefore I am particularly grateful for all of you who followed our invitation, and I'll deliver now the floor to Mr. Mua Ruakua, and I thank you very much indeed that you accepted the role of opening this conference on behalf of the invited parliamentarians. Thank you very much.